Hello and good morning, everyone. My name is Jillian Bender-Cormier. I'm brand manager with Bender Insurance Solutions. We want to welcome you to another educational BenderU webinar discussing fleet safety and defensive driving. Some housekeeping notes. At the end of this webinar, we will have an engaging Q&A session that I will be facilitating. If you have any questions during the webinar, please feel free to type them into the chat box or in the Q&A section. During that Q&A time at the end of the presentation, I'll be sharing your questions with our speaker. We want to be conscious of time, so if we don't get to answer all of your questions, we will gladly reach out to you individually after the webinar. You are all in listen-only mode and will remain muted throughout the webinar. The session is being recorded. At the conclusion of the webinar, the recording link will be forwarded to you. We have a fantastic expert sharing with us this morning, Bender's own Chad Watts. Chad is a construction risk and insurance specialist with Bender Insurance Solutions. He has 15 years of experience helping contractors manage their risk and build strong insurance programs. When he teaches, he draws a lot from his 15 years of experience as a father. He has 6 children and loves learning from each of them since they are always willing to share honest feedback. Chad became passionate about defensive driving as he saw the market shifting a few years ago and is excited to present this webinar on fleet safety and defensive driving. Without further ado, welcome Chad.
All right, thank you for that. I hope everybody's having a good morning. We're going to go ahead and get into our conversation. I'm excited to share this information with you today on fleet safety and defensive driving. So today we're going to talk about why fleet safety and defensive driving is important. I'm also going to teach you some exercises that you can use to educate and inspire your drivers. And then I'll show you some of the steps to take so that you can begin to build your own fleet safety program. So why fleet safety and defensive driving? Well, for years now, the auto marketplace has paid more in claims than premium they've collected. So they started raising rates. And now they're starting to limit their exposure to losses, right? So how are they doing that? Well, the the insurance marketplace, they have access to so much data, right? They can see who's having losses. They can see when they're having losses, what time of day it is. So they have access to so much data that they've been able to identify which classes of business seem to have more losses more frequently or more severe losses. For those contractors on the call, you are in a class of business where you're considered high risk. So we have to keep that in mind, that certain classes of business are high risk. They're also trying to avoid monoline auto. This is where you only have your auto insurance with the insurance company, right? So they are trying to offset the auto losses with some other lines of business like general liability or workers' compensation, right? They've determined auto's a loser, so we need more to offset those losses. And again, you contractors are in a position where most auto insurance companies don't want to write your liability, your general liability or your workers' compensation. Right, so developing a program that makes you look better is going to be even more important because your access to markets just becomes more narrow. They're declining to quote. They're issuing non-renewal notices, and they're even issuing, if you can get a renewal, a conditional renewal. So this is where they might say, okay, we'll write your auto insurance, but we're going to raise your premium 30%. Or we're going to make you take this deductible. So they're changing the conditions of your policy if you're going to take that renewal. They're doing this because the number of accidents continues to climb, the cost of accidents continue to climb, right? We have more vehicles on the road, we have more distractions. We can't ignore fraud. There's definitely some fraud going on, and so that's causing the number of claims to rise. The cost of claims goes up because, well, the bumper you hit 10 years ago, now it has cameras and sensors. So there's so much technology in vehicles now that the cost of a claim just goes up, right? And we can't ignore that. So I read a Wall Street Journal article about a couple weeks ago, and the heading of this article was "Nuclear Verdicts Have Insurers Running from Trucks." Right? Does that not paint a good picture of what's happening in court? So if your auto accident ends up in front of a jury, the insurance companies know that these juries are very sympathetic to a plaintiff, and that it could be ugly. So that's another reason that the cost of accidents keeps going up. So as we talked through this, I'm trying to get your mind ready for a discussion on defensive driving. Okay, so what is defensive driving? I'm just going to read this slide to you. It's a mindset, like a culture of accountability. You don't look for someone to blame. You look at what you could do or what you could have done differently to avoid the accident. Okay, this is where defensive driving starts. We have to look inside. We have to slow down. And it's not about proving anything to anyone on the road, right? It's not about being right. It's about being safe. So I love to teach the game of baseball. I was a Little League coach for years. I was a Little League player for years. And what I'm about to share with you, I actually learned from my coach when I played from 9, 10, 11, and 12 years of age. And I continued the tradition on with the Little Leaguers I taught. But I taught my Little Leaguers principles of baseball that I think mirror the principles that we should have when we talk about defensive driving. So this is what it would look like. When I would sit down with my team before every game, we would go through this little chant. And I would say, what's the most important thing in baseball? And they'd all yell back at me, sportsmanship. What comes next? Discipline. What does it mean? Follow the rules and do what you're told. How many times do I have to tell you? Once. When you're out in that field, what are you thinking? To know what to do with the ball before it comes to you. Okay, I'm getting the players' minds ready. For number one, this is a game of baseball, right? We're here to have fun. So we have to have the right sportsmanship to have fun. If you're not going to have fun, don't play. Okay, and then what comes next? Discipline. We have to follow the rules and do what we're told, because that helps us have fun and it helps the game just move along, right? It's a better way of doing things. Knowing what to do with the ball, right? In practice, what are we doing? We're developing good habits in practice. We're developing habits so that when we're in the game, mentally we're thinking what we're going to do, but physically we've already created habits. So when the ball's hit to us, we don't even have to think about fielding the ball and throwing the ball. We just have to remember where to throw it. Okay, so this is the mindset that I want to take into defensive driving. And it looks a little bit like this, right? What's the most important thing in defensive driving? It's sportsmanship, right? Your emotions. You can't let your emotions change your attitude. You have to focus on safety. If you're not going to be safe, don't drive. Okay, sportsmanship is most important. Next is discipline, right? We have to follow the laws and do what you're told. I like this example. When somebody turns on the blinker to get over in front of you, do what you're being told, right? What are they telling you? I'm moving over, make room. So do that, right? Show some discipline, back off and make room for them to get in. Then we got to know what to do with the hazard before it comes our way. All right. This is when we take the step, or this is the step when we start to use the next slide here, the acronym, are you a defensive driver? Okay. Now you'll see at the bottom there, the National Safety Center Defensive Driving Course. When you see that on the bottom of the slide, I pulled some information from that course. And so I want to make sure they get the credit for that. But are you a defensive driver? R stands for recognize the hazard. Okay. So when we have to know what to do with the hazard before it comes to us, these are the steps to do that. We recognize the hazard. We understand the defense to avoid the hazard. And then we need to act correctly and in time. All right. So know what to do with the hazard before it comes your way. This takes some practice, right? We have to walk through these hazards with our drivers so that when the hazard comes, they don't have to think about it, right? They've been trained. They know what to do. So I'm going to take you through the first exercise that you can do with your employees. This is an exercise that illustrates how we multitask, right? This is the brain working while we multitask. So this is a two-step little exercise. Step one, you're going to count 1 to 27. Immediately after, you're going to say the alphabet A to Z, right? You have to participate. So get your phone out, turn on your timer, and time yourself. Look at my note there. When I did this, I did it sloppy. I made mistakes that I didn't fix. It took me 9 seconds, right? I did it again with no mistakes, and it took me 12 seconds. So this shouldn't take long. But I want you to time yourself while you count 1 to 27 and then say the alphabet A to Z. Go ahead. All right. Hopefully you're done by now. All right, now what we've done there is we've done one thing and then the other. Okay, now on our next slide, we're going to do it a little differently. But I want to point out that when we multitask, our mind can't focus on two things at the same time. Okay, that's the cognitive ability to think about two things at the same time. Our mind actually flips from one thing to the other and then back and forth and back and forth. And you're going to see that illustrated here as you count and say the alphabet in a multitasking fashion. So you're going to do it again, get your timer ready, and you're going to count and say the alphabet like this: 1A, 2B, 3C, 4D, all the way to 27Z, right? Okay, now look at my note. This took me 1 minute and 15 seconds, but it was messy the first couple times I did it, right? I couldn't even get through it without mistakes. So about the fourth time I was able to do it with no mistakes, and it took me 1 minute and 15 seconds. So I want you to do this. Take some time. I'll give you 30 seconds or so. You don't have to do it completely, but to go ahead, do this exercise. Go. It's hard to do. All right, you can stop now if you want. Some of you did it, some of you are still doing it, some of you probably didn't do it. The participation is required here because it helps you get into the shoes of your employees, because you're going to walk them through this, all right? And those of you who have teenage drivers, do this with them, okay? This really helps people understand what's going on in their mind as they multitask. And this serves a couple purposes, okay? We learn one thing, right? We can learn the alphabet like this. I don't know the alphabet like this. I have to sing it. Okay? If I'm not singing it, I'm going to get thrown off somewhere along the lines. But when we train ourselves to do it a certain way, we can begin to multitask, where we don't think about one thing and we think about the other, right? The one thing is just second nature. We can do it. The other thing we can think about. So we can train ourselves to do this alphabet and counting in 12 seconds, right? But it would take a lot of practice, right? So there's one. We can multitask effectively, but it takes practice, all right? So let's go into our next slide. As far as distractions go, when we talk about multitasking, we have a lot of distractions in the car, right? So we do a lot of multitasking. We have to know how fast we're going, right? We got to manage our speed. We have to manage our position in our lane. We have to pay attention to other drivers, right? So we are multitasking when we drive. And it's hard enough to do, right? We're pulling up to an intersection. Are there pedestrians? Am I slowing? Am I stopping? Am I yielding? What are the other cars doing? So it's important to recognize all the multitasking we already do when we drive, and then we can slide in the distracted driving and how detrimental that can be to our ability to make decisions quickly, right? We bring in a cell phone into the car. Now we're multitasking and we're cognitively going to something else like our phone, okay? So this serves two purposes: multitasking that we already do and how inefficient we become when we are distracted. All right. Here are some of the hazards. Okay, so we talked about, are you a defensive driver? Recognize the hazard, understand the defense. So here are some of the hazards. This is not an all-inclusive list, but these are some of them. Okay, so unfamiliar vehicles, unfamiliar route, inexperienced drivers, right? Let's stop there for a second. If we're already multitasking, right, and we're trying to create good habits to avoid being slow to make decisions or slow to react, does it make sense that an unfamiliar vehicle or an unfamiliar route could become a problem, right? So if we're taking a vehicle we don't usually take, or if we're doing a route we don't usually do, we might need to plan for more time, right? Give ourselves a little extra time because we need to make sure we're safe. How about an inexperienced driver? All this multitasking makes you think twice about hiring that 18-year-old, right? Put your $1 million insurance policy on the hood of that car. Yeah, you'll think twice when you recognize all the multitasking and how much experience is needed to do it well, do it safely. We got intersections, pedestrians, technology, weather. These are all hazards, okay? What about children at play? We all know how difficult it is to see people, especially children, on the sidewalk when the street is lined with vehicles. This is another exercise you can do with your employees. I think you should do it with anyone you know, because this will save somebody's life. I learned this tip when I was a freshman in high school. My driver's education teacher taught it to me, and I never forgot it, and I'm grateful. So check out this picture. Cars parked on the side of the road. Can you see the danger in this picture? Right here. There's danger. Can you see those little legs and feet under that trailer? There's a close-up. All right, this is my 4-year-old. He's 5 now. He turned 5 yesterday. This is my 3-year-old. I took a video of them walking down this sidewalk, going behind this trailer and popping out into the street here. Couldn't get the video to work in this presentation, so I took this still shot. But what I want to illustrate is that it's very difficult to spot anybody or even children trying to look around cars, trying to look over cars, right? If you look under the car, you can see their little legs and feet. The video was beautiful. You saw them disappear and you saw their feet walking to the street, and then you saw them pop out. Okay, if your drivers are looking down here, they'll see a dog, they'll see children, they'll see anybody before they pop out and surprise them. Okay, so you try that tonight on your way home, or whenever you're near this situation. Look under the car and find those feet. You won't be surprised when they pop out. You'll be expecting them because you'll see them coming. Okay. This is another slide from the National Safety Center. 6 most unsafe driving behaviors. Okay, if you're implementing a fleet safety program, this is important to recognize, right? This might drive some of your training. Improper speed, lots of excuses for speeding, right? But defensive drivers have no excuse. Okay. How about this one? Violating right of way. Let's do another little exercise here. So look at those other distracted driving, turning improperly, driving left of center. Left of center is the yellow line that divides one direction from the other. Okay, that's center. Driving left of center, what does that mean? You're in head-on collision zone. Okay, that's one of the most unsafe behaviors, is driving left of center, right, in the opposite direction. Following too closely, let's pause on right of way. This is an exercise you can do with your employees, right? This is also going to help with a mindset. How many times have you heard, I had the right of way? Okay, this is a good one. If two vehicles come from different directions and stop at a stop sign, who has the right of way? Is it A, neither? B, the one who got there first? C, the one turning right? Or D, the one going straight? What do you think? I'll tell you, this is a trick question, okay? The answer is neither vehicle has the right of way. The reason that is because traffic regulations only state who must yield the right of way. It doesn't say who has the right of way, it says who must yield the right of way. So when another driver is legally required to give you the right of way, but fails to do so, you then have the requirement to stop or yield for safety. All right, does that make sense? So no one truly has the right of way. It's you, someone must yield the right of way. Okay, so think of how many times you've heard that. I had the right of way, it wasn't my fault. Right? With this new perspective, who was at fault when no one has the right of way? Right? In a lot of cases, all the drivers involved had some fault, right? They have some responsibility. So that's another good one to walk through with your employees. So here are the exercises that I would recommend walking through with your employees. The first three we did, the next two we're going to do right now. So the second rule, the 3-second rule. The 3-second rule is about how close to follow, okay? I can't see my camera, but let's use this on my shirt as something on the road. So here's a vehicle, here's you and the other vehicle behind it. And you're traveling, when the vehicle in front of you passes something, that's when you start to count, 1001, 1002, 1003, all right? That's how you judge the cushion you have. The cushion's going to grow if you're going faster. The cushion's going to shrink if you're going slow, right? But the 3-second rule is important because I just lost my word. The data shows that the time it takes from identifying I need to stop to removing your foot from the gas and pressing the brake, the time that takes, right? The research was what I was looking for. The research shows that takes somewhere around 2.7 seconds, right? To see you need to stop and actually press the brake takes about 2.7 seconds. So a 3-second cushion will prevent you or give you a better chance at not colliding, all right? There's still other factors like weather, brakes, how well are your brakes, how good are your tires. Those also play a role in how quickly you can stop, but the 3-second rule should be a minimum, all right? So walk through that with your employees, help them see, and there's videos you can look at on YouTube, help them see what the rule is, right? 1001, 1002, and help them understand why it's 3 seconds. Why not a second and a half, right? It's not enough time to actually press the brake. Seat belts. Okay. I think most people wear their seat belts now, but I think some people don't. And this is a good exercise to run through because it helps them understand how important a seat belt is. So there are 3 collisions that occur in every motor vehicle accident. All right. Collision 1 is the vehicle colliding with something, right? When that vehicle collides with something, everything in that vehicle continues traveling at the same speed and in the same direction until it collides with something, all right? So the vehicle collides with something, the passenger then collides with something, and the third collision involves your internal organs, all right? When you collide with something, your organs then collide with either another organ or your chest wall or something, okay? So those are the 3 collisions that happen in every motor vehicle accident. If you're wearing your seatbelt, hopefully it's only those 3 collisions and you collide with your seatbelt and your organs only collide once with your whatever they collide with. If we're not wearing our seatbelt, we're going to collide with the steering wheel and then our organs collide. And then we're going to hit the windshield and then our organs collide. And then we hit the pavement and our organs collide. Look at all those collisions that our organs and our bodies have to absorb, all right? The seatbelt does a couple of things. It keeps us in the passenger compartment, right? Airbags are going off everywhere, and the seatbelt keeps us in there where it's safer. The seatbelt also, when worn properly, goes across our chest, right? And then over our lap, and those parts of the body will absorb the impact of that accident, right? And it will have less effect on us. So if we wear the seatbelt and we wear it safely, we're kept in the passenger compartment and we feel less effect of the accident. 3 collisions that occur in every motor vehicle accident. Walk through that with your employees and get buy-in that they'll wear their seatbelt every time. All right. Now let's get into our fleet safety program. We're going to walk through this program with this framework of these 4 steps to risk management, okay? Now, those of you who are risk managers, you know there are more steps. This is a very simple format, but that's what we're trying to do here is we're trying to keep this simple so that you can leave here and do it, all right? So the first step that I would recommend is identify and analyze the risk. Then we're going to establish a documentation and communication system. We're going to try to control the risk, and then we'll see if there's ways to transfer the risk, okay? So we have vehicles on the road, definitely a risk. This is our step of identifying and analyzing the risk, okay? So we've identified we have vehicles on the road. What does that mean? It means we've got a $1 million insurance policy or the $1 million, whatever the assets of the company are on the hood of that car, right? That car gets in an accident, the company's at risk, okay? That's something we need to identify. We have drivers on the road, not just our drivers, but all drivers, right? Different driving habits, different perspectives with regards to safety. We can't control them. We can only control our actions. But we have to realize that they are a risk to us, and defensive driving is so much more important. Right? We've got bicycles and pedestrians on the road. You ever seen one of those videos where a pedestrian's on their phone and walks right in front of a car? This is a reality, right? Distractions aren't just in vehicles, they're all over the place. Bikers and pedestrians are distracted and they are a hazard. We've got the legal system, right? The Wall Street Journal article, nuclear verdicts. This is something we have to consider when we analyze the risk. The name of the company's on the vehicle, right? People are going to recognize us. The list goes on. This isn't an all-inclusive list. There's all kinds of risk. So it's your job to go through this process of identifying and analyzing the risk. The next step of establishing a documentation and communication system, okay? We have a driver's list, hopefully, right? We know whose licenses expire when. We know whether they're approved to drive. Some of you have drivers in their own vehicles, right? Does that vehicle have insurance on it? When does that insurance expire? When does it need to be renewed? When do you need to get proof that it did renew? You've got vehicles. Hopefully you've got a list of them, right? What's in the vehicle? Who's approved to drive it? Who is driving it? When does it need to be maintained? Okay. This is all going to be important in your fleet safety program. Do drivers know how to handle an accident? Right? Establish a system to document the accident and to communicate the accident. The driver has to be able to communicate it to you in management. Management has to be able to communicate it to the insurance company. Okay, we have to establish a good flow of information. Telematics system. okay? This provides a lot of information for somebody managing a fleet. And some insurance companies will actually give you a discount just for installing the system. Okay, so that's great. That's a good bonus. But then what? We've installed the system. We got a decent discount. Now what do we do with it? How do we use the data? Okay, that's such an important step, because when you review the information, you can start to change driving habits, right? You're monitoring how they drive, and now you can change it. You can sit down with them and say, hey, look, you got some bad scores here. What were you doing that day? Or look, you've been speeding all week long. Is there something going on that, we need to get your mind right? Defensive driving. So you can sit down and coach up your drivers on their actual driving habits. When you can show an underwriter, an insurance underwriter who determines your premium, when you can show them that you installed the system and you're paying attention, and now you've been able to you've been able to change the habits, right? The first 3 months of having this system, these were our scores, right? The next 3 months after we did this training, this training, this training, these are our scores. That improvement, that's where the rubber meets the road. That's where an underwriter in this marketplace can say, heck yeah, I'm giving you a renewal, right? You are part of the solution. You're not part of the problem. Okay, so installing the system is just part of the importance. What you do with the data is most important. Okay. Now we're going to control the risk. So we have our list of drivers. Who's qualified to drive? Who has the experience to drive? Are we looking at MVRs before we allow them to drive, before we even hire them, right? The days are gone when you could hire somebody and say, hey, broker, can this guy drive, right? It still happens, but that's why we're seeing a lot of non-renewals. We're seeing conditional renewals, because that's not enough. You can't just ask the insurance company, is this guy okay to drive? You've got to pay attention to who you're hiring. Can they drive before you even hire them? This shows that you're paying attention, right? You're doing your part to avoid hiring an accident. Driving rules and guidelines, right? You have to establish those rules and guidelines. No distractions, no personal use of vehicle, no family members in the car. You've got to develop those rules, follow the rules and do what you're told. You've got to develop those rules. This is how we control the risk. Driver training, right? How often do we train? So in the construction world, we have regular tailgate meetings, right, about safety. Are we doing defensive driving training with our drivers on a regular basis? I say that when the foreman's in the field doing a tailgate, the shop guy, the shop manager is in doing defensive driving with the drivers, right? This needs to become a focus, the training, the regular conversation about defensive driving. The telematics, again, this is another way to control the risk, because you get data that tells you how they're driving, tells you their habits, and you can start to change those habits. So I like this list because the first two are proactive steps to controlling the risk. The third one is an active step. The last one is the reactive step, right? All three steps are involved here. We're being proactive, we're being active, and we are reacting because we need to react. But we'll start to see that when you dial in who you're hiring and who you're letting drive, you're going to see less bad habits on the telematics scores, right? Less to react to, because we're selecting the right people and we're training them regularly so it's top of mind. Okay, transfer the risk. Now during this step, this is that fourth step I gave you in the risk management steps. During this step, it's important for you to reflect on why you do what you do now, right? Why do we pick up and deliver our own supplies? Why do we service vehicles in-house? Why do we provide company vehicles? Okay, that framework of why you do it and why you do it now will help you decide if a change is needed or not. Okay, you might decide that having vehicles on the road, that the reward of that is worth the risk. You might decide that, and that's okay, right? As long as you're actually going through the process of making decisions based on what you know now. Okay, so have the discussion. Why do we do these things now? Because maybe letting suppliers deliver will take some of our trucks off the road or just on the road less often, right? Letting a mechanic shop service our vehicles. Now when a malfunction happens, something goes wrong on the road, we might have somebody else's insurance limits to pay first, right? We become secondary to pay a loss. Same with employees in their own vehicles. If we can give some of our employees company vehicles and the others drive their own, if they can still do their job, do it safe, do it well, if they have insurance, they can pay their loss first, right? And then we become secondary. So there's lots of reasons to make these decisions. I want you to understand something though. These are not the answers, and these are not my recommendations to do these things. These are examples of what to consider when you have the discussion with your management team, okay? These are some of the things you could consider, and there's more that you could consider. Okay, now the takeaway. All right, we just did this. I don't know what we're 30 minutes in. We did this presentation on fleet safety. The next step, what do we do now? Right, we take these baby steps. Start with you, right? Evaluate your mindset. Evaluate your driving on the way home tonight. Okay, start with you. Put yourself in their shoes and start to change your mind before you can start to change theirs, right? Then you schedule time to meet with your safety committee or your management team and discuss what you've heard today. Okay, so we're evaluating what we do, our mindset. Now as a company, as a management team, we're starting to evaluate, how do we do this? Where do we start? You start to develop your fleet safety outline. Okay, on the next slide, I'm going to give you a sample outline, okay, so that you have something to work with. And then the fourth step is to just start implementing the program, one step at a time, one bite at, right? How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. You just go through this process, and like anything that's worthwhile, it's worth fighting for, it's worth doing. And then you just repeat this process. How are we doing? What changes do we need to make? Let's implement the changes. How are we doing? What changes do we make? Implement the changes. All right, this is a big leap towards becoming better. So break it up into baby steps. So here's that sample table of contents. Wow, there's a lot of stuff on this slide, right? We didn't talk about everything. We talked about a couple of things, right? We mentioned the safety committee and how they play a role in this. We talked about vehicle use and insurance requirements, right? Talked about accident record keeping, reporting, and analysis. So we talked about some of this stuff. We didn't even get into too much detail about each of those things. There is a lot here. Don't let it overwhelm you, okay? The goal today wasn't for you to walk out with a fleet safety program, put it on the shelf, and we're done. The goal was to give you enough information, enough to think about, some of those exercises to use so that you could start to develop your own program, right? This is not easy. It's definitely worth it, and you can do it, but invite us to be a part of it, right? Let us be part of this team. Let us use our experience and help in the process. We could even drive the first couple meetings. Don't feel like you got to do it alone. So let us be a part of your team. Let us help with this. I think we're done. I think if you have questions, you can go ahead and type those in now. And here's my contact information. If you want to save your questions for a private conversation, that's fine. But Jillian, I think I'll turn it over to you to start that Q&A session.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Chad. Okay, great. So we will go ahead and open it up to you folks for your questions. As Chad mentioned, go ahead and type questions in the chat section, in the Q&A. We did get a question earlier. I'm happy to share it. If a copy of the slide decks would be sent out, and yes, we are very happy to send those out to you after the presentation. But we have a couple questions that just came in, Chad. The first question is, you mentioned MVRs. Can you tell me about the POLL program? Sorry, Chad, you're on mute. 1 second. There you go.
There we go. Okay, so yes, the California POLL program is a program that the Department of Motor Vehicles put together so that an employer can actually collect driving information throughout the year. And so what you do is it's actually a pretty inexpensive program. You go on the DMV website, you download the program. There's things that the employees have to sign, but you pay, I believe it's $5 to enroll each employee, $5 each. That's that initial enrollment. And then you pay $1 every time they send you an update. And what will drive an update is when it renews, right, on an annual basis, or when something changes. So if they get an accident or a ticket that goes on their report, you will get an automatic notification of that. Now, it is a good system to help monitor what you don't know and what employees aren't telling you. It's not fast, right? It's not real time. So the notice might come in 2 months after the incident occurred, but you still know about it, okay? So I like the program because it helps you monitor, it helps you pay attention, it helps you know what's happening when employees aren't telling you. It's inexpensive. Again, you just go on the DMV website, you can, and I can even send you a link where it'll give you all the details, and the employees sign off that they know you're getting these notifications, and then you set up a bank account where it just runs the dollar every time they send you a notice. It's a real easy system, and it's a very beneficial system. So I hope that answers the question.
Fantastic. And like Chad mentioned, with the link, I can go ahead and include that in my follow-up email to everybody at the end of the webinar. Okay, Chad, we have one more question. If I have too high of expectations for my drivers, I'm not going to have any drivers. What should I do? Where do I find drivers?
This is the question everybody wants an answer to, right? Because it doesn't just relate to driving, but it relates to just who you hire, period. But for your drivers, you can set the expectation high where you want it, right? You're the owner. This is your business. You're not just making money and making a living for your own family, but you're making a living for other families that you employ. So there's a lot riding on who you hire, and I think it's okay to expect your drivers to drive safely. So you need to feel empowered to set the bar high, and you need to move forward with confidence. If that means you have to scale back and come up with other ways to do things on the road, you might have to do that. But I wouldn't sacrifice safety for how many drivers I have on the road. I would rather be more safe. Some of you may like that answer, some of you may not, but that's my opinion.
Wonderful, thank you so much. All right, well, I haven't seen any other questions come in, but if we do, if you do have a question that pops into your mind after the webinar is over, fear not, go ahead, send it over to us. We'll be happy to help you. Thank you, Chad, so much for sharing with us today. We appreciate all of you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us for today's BenderU on fleet safety and defensive driving. Now, like I just mentioned, the recording link and the slide decks will be sent to you following this webinar. We're here to help you in any way, so feel free to reach out to us. Chad's information will be included in that as well. We all hope you have a wonderful day, and we hope to see you again. Thank you again.